Hey everybody, Tony D and Little Joan here with another hot take, this one about the New York Times. The New York Times is, well, there's no other way to put it. It's pretty much been overrun by the same sort of left-wing, mindless idiots who are roaming the streets and throwing bricks through windows. Only these guys, they don't throw bricks made of stone. They throw verbal bricks on the internet. They create clickbait, like the clickbait I talked about yesterday about traffic signals being racist, you know, that kind of thing. That's the New York Times today. Partly it's driven by money, which is ironic considering that most of the people that are taking over the New York Times are left-wing Marxists, but who claim not to really be interested in money, and they want a Marxist utopia. They really think communism could work. Oh, but pay them lots of money. So what they're doing is they're basically done to the New York Times, that they're trying to do to YouTube and the internet, that they've done in places like Twitter. They're pushing out anybody who has an opinion that doesn't fit in with extreme left orthodoxy. And that is slowly going more and more extreme because the people at the helm of this push are the Marxists. These are the guys who believe in postmodernism. They believe in the ideal of tearing everything down for a reset. And that means everything. That means your family, the nuclear family. That means history. That means everything. Everything must start over. Everything. And the thing is, they want to be in charge of how they reset things. And they're going to do it, in this case, from the New York Times. They're going to try to do it from a cultural perspective. Anyone who disagrees will be shouted down, their careers destroyed. They'll be called a bigot and a racist and all sorts of terrible things. That, by the way, that shouting down of people is getting weaker and weaker and weaker the more they do it. The more they do it, the more people are included in that group, and the more people they make as enemies. And what the Marxists don't understand is most people aren't Marxists. The vast majority of Americans just aren't into Marxism at all. And they seem to gain a lot of power quickly because they lie. They simply lie to you and say, well, this isn't about Marxism. This is about racism. You're not a racist, are you? This is about George Floyd and police brutality. You're not for police brutality, are you? And you go, well, no, I'm not for police brutality. Well, you're not for racism, right? Oh, no, I'm not for racism. Oh, okay. Well, then you have to acknowledge that capitalism plays a part in the racism, right? And you go, well, I'm not so sure about that. Well, you're not a racist, are you? Well, no, I'm not a racist. Well, then you have to agree that capitalism plays a role. I mean, a huge role. Really, we need to take down capitalism and the patriarchy because you understand that that's sexist and racist, right? See, that's how they kind of bring you in. They start slow, and then they slowly turn up the juice. And the next thing you know, you're defending Antifa and polite conversation. And everything to these people is power. Everything, sorry, Joe, everything is a power play. You know, the nuclear family, it's power. The father and mother have power and the children don't. And, you know, there's a power in a relationship between a man and woman. The man has too much power. See, the Marxists want to balance all that out. Everything's going to be equal now. Your kids are going to have an equal say in how the family spends the money. You know, that kind of thing. They actually sort of believe this, but they don't live in reality. Oh, John, hold on. But yeah, they don't believe in reality. They think this communist utopia can work. But part of the reason they think that is because for many, many years, they've always been kept in check, right? So you can fantasize and romanticize the communist utopia. I'll let you down, Joe. You're mopey now. You can fantasize and romanticize the communist utopia when it doesn't exist. And that's easy. But when it sort of starts to come into being, like when it happened in the Chaz, well, then you got a real problem, right? Then you have to say, well, that's not real communism. That didn't work because, well, you know, everybody was against us. And, you know, the city was against us. It only worked if we take over the whole city. And then when it doesn't work in the city, well, the state was against us. Well, we had to take over the whole state. And when the state collapses, it'll be like, well, obviously it didn't work because we didn't take over the whole country. It just keeps building from there. And part of the reason, the Marxists are so stupid is they are arrogant enough to believe that people in their ranks aren't ambitious. There are people in their ranks that are ambitious. That's how you get a Stalin. See, Stalin was ambitious enough to know, these a-holes, I just understand where the levers of power are. I understand that I just, shout at somebody, you're oppressing the proletariat, and boom, off to the gulag they go. As long as I can keep doing it, as long as I can keep sending people to the gulag, nobody can stop me. So that's kind of the Marxist agenda here at the New York Times, right? They keep saying, in this case, the gulag is the end of your career. So they had this woman they brought on named Barry Weiss, and she's a woman, even though her name is Barry. And she was brought in as a centrist moderate at the New York Times, which is very funny to me because, as you know, in Wokistan, the entire novel starts out when the college brings in a centrist speaker, and the students protest the centrist speaker because to them he's like a Nazi. Barry, in her column, in her final column, basically explains the atmosphere in the New York Times, and it's very much like on the campus of Upstate College in Wokistan. Everybody who doesn't agree with left-wing orthodoxy is a Nazi and can be called as such. They're bigot, racist, misogynist, homophobe, transphobe. You're all these things because you don't bend the knee. And they will just keep saying this stuff until you either bend the knee or until they find a different target. And a lot of people just don't want to deal with the flack because it just sort of kind of comes in and overwhelms you. So some of them will say, oh, well, okay, yeah, sure, all right, I'm cool, I'm with you. But they don't understand that doesn't really protect them. It might protect them for a while, but in the end, they always come for the rest. Because you're never woke enough. That's why I keep saying, right? You're never woke enough. No one at the New York Times is woke enough. It won't be until the money is completely obliterated. And I think we're headed towards that because, first off, the New York Times was a newspaper at heart. I mean, there's nothing more newspapery than the New York Times. And newspapers, they're done, right? I mean, yeah, there's still people who love the feel of newspaper and all that. I always hated newspaper. I don't like to get newspaper on my hands. I hate the smell. But those people are slowly dying. They're slowly dying off. So all you're going to have is the New York Times website. And what is a website these days? Well, it's just another, back in the day, it was just something you got free with your Netscape purchase, right? Your Netscape account, and you got a free website, and people will put wacky stuff on it. New York Times is no different than that. Yeah, they got money, and they can game the system a little bit because they're part of a bigger media conglomerate, and blah, blah, blah. And they got a brand and whatever. But the brand's being destroyed by these Marxists because, again, they destroy everything. So once there's no brand left, once the New York Times has absolutely no credibility, has the credibility of, say, the National Enquirer, even less so, because at least the National Enquirer is kind of a fun thing to read. At least it sort of gives you that, like, oh, I always wanted to hear a story like this kind of feeling. When the New York Times is just so ground down into nothing, and they're going to have to start making cuts somewhere. They're just going to collapse. The problem is, of course, they have deeper pockets than most media conglomerates, and they'll last a long time. It's not like Vox or what was the other ones that die, or Vice, and I think there was one called Mike. They're all kind of in trouble. They're all scrambling for money and rage clicks or whatnot. And that's why they got to do stories like, well, I think that story was on Medium or Mediate or something, but why traffic signals are racist, but after a while, those stories just don't work anymore. They just don't work. And quite frankly, the only people they work on are people who are still kind of news junkies like me. You know, for me, I look for those stuff to rail about for my videos. But, you know, the average person, you know, for a while, that might get you some mileage, right? You get people to click on it. But, you know, after you've clicked on like 10 or 15 of those and they turn out to just be some idiot and his opinion, you're just going to start tuning out. Eventually, you're just going to go through the headlines and go, yeah, no, I don't want to read that. You're going to start to look for stuff that, you know, it's a little happier, maybe more in tune with your actual political ideologies. The New York Times is doomed. If you got a subscription, I don't know why you're wasting your money at this point. I mean, do you really think it's important to subscribe to the New York Times, a newspaper that only is relevant as a brand? You know, you can get the information out of the New York Times from anywhere. I mean, everybody covers this stuff. And the New York Times now, because it's so left-wing, it's so far in a political mode for one side, you're missing out on all kinds of things. They're not going to cover the stuff that, say, Fox News covers. Not all of it. They're not going to have conservative perspectives. You know, at least Fox News, you know, you watch Tucker Carlson, they'll have liberal guys on once in a while. So I say, you know, it's just time to put the New York Times out to pasture. And if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Like, why are you really reading this? You can get anything from anywhere. You can get information all over the internet. You can literally go to, and it doesn't have to be something stupid like Facebook or Twitter or Reddit. You can just go to any spot on the internet. You could search. It's not just Google. There's all kinds of search engines you could search. And you just type in news, and whatever you want to find the news about, boom, it pops up. I do it every day with New Jersey. All kinds of stuff pops up. So, you know, it's time to get rid of the New York Times and just ignore it. Who cares? The gray lady's done. The gray lady's over. Let's put her in the ground, and let's forget about this era of her reporting, because it's just a bunch of college students screeching about Marx at this point. I mean, it's marginally better than Teen Vogue. And yeah, Teen Vogue, totally Marxist. I mean, they actually talk about Marxism in Teen Vogue. Look it up. Google it if you don't believe me.